Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I thank you and I'm delighted to be invited to present my testimony on Ethiopia, a country I was forced to leave some 4 or 5 years ago in opposition to Mengistu Haile Mariam's Stalinist and repressive policies. Unfortunately, however, that country has once again come under the clutches of another ruthless and Stalinist tyrant. So it's almost melodramatic. Out goes Mengistu to Harare, and in comes Meles Zenawi through London, a Tweedledee replacing a Tweedledum. The outcome of the London conference was most disastrous for Ethiopia, most destabilizing for the Horn of Africa, and most disquieting for the rest of Africa. Trouble is, the conference, if it really was a conference, suffered from one fatal structural deficiency, which in turn led to some fatal outcomes. First, the confab brought together ethnically based armed groups who are the sworn enemies of the Ethiopian nation state and have formed an alliance to dismember and tear down that very state. Those groups with a multi-ethnic base who enjoy the broad support of the Ethiopian people, the vast majority of people who do not belong to any of these political groupings, either armed or political, were pointedly and deliberately excluded. Imagine, sir, imagine, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the PLO's Yasser Arafat sitting together with the Popular Front's George Habash to decide on the fate of the state of Israel without Israel's participation. Second, the conference also sent a signal and set the stage for Ethiopia's dismemberment through Eritrean secession. It was a blow, a dagger blow, aimed at the very heart of the integrity of the Ethiopian state system and a serious threat to the integrity of the African political order. It's no wonder that the decision outraged millions of Ethiopians all over. One cannot overstress the deep-seated, instinctive, and fierce resolve of all Ethiopians to preserve their national unity and independence. That unique independence had been defended by fierce resistance to no less than 8 foreign invasions, and that had forged a consciousness and pride of national unity and culture found nowhere on the continent of Africa. Those foreign invasions have by no means spared the territory known only in modern times as Eritrea. In fact, of the 8 invasions from the south, the west, and the south, and the north have involved Eritrea. This was scarcely surprising. For centuries, it was the political and the cultural center of Ethiopia, with the capital at Adulis, symbol of the independence which others, even before the colonial period, sought to suppress. Ethiopia as the cultural, political, and economic sector of the Horn and its coastline of Eritrea stood as a vast barrier to both European and Arab expansionist designs. That the people of Eritrea had, through a process of self-determination under the auspices of the United Nations, had exercised the right to determine and had determined that by deliberately and voluntarily linking their territory in federal association with Ethiopia was unfortunately, conveniently forgotten. Any future decision on Eritrea, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I would assure you, if and when it is taken, would have to be taken not by the inhabitants of one province, but by the people of Ethiopia as a whole. Thirdly, the decision to let in the TPLF, the African counterpart of the Asian Khmer Rouge, I would like to call them the Khmer Noir. Yes. The decision to let in the TPLF and occupy Addis Ababa and grab state power was tragic and inexplicable. How an ideologically intoxicated, ethnically narrowly based guerrilla force, as Francis Le Monde did say in this morning's editorial, headed by a radical Stalinist with no experience to raise and administer a family, let alone administer a country of 50 million people, should be asked to march in and assume state responsibility is beyond me to comprehend, and I ask for divine intervention. That must be the first time when a self-declared Stalinist is sanctioned by the United States to take over state power. The upshot of all these decisions and actions is to seriously compromise Ethiopia's fundamental interests. And the country is saddled now with a Stalinist regime which is just as repressive as Mengistu Haile Mariam's. But whatever has happened, Mr. Chairman, has happened in London. And it is time to correct mistakes and move on. There is no suggestion on my part at any rate that there was any deliberate plan on behalf of Mr. Cohen or the State Department or the administration in general to put Ethiopia in jeopardy. That has never been suggested. Ethiopia is always in love with Americans and respectful of the traditions and values and democratic institutions of America. So it remains to this very day. But mistakes have been made, and it is important, I think, to correct the mistakes and move on. And how can we move on? Well, I think the first thing is that the United States should reaffirm its traditional support for Ethiopia's unity and territorial integrity. The conflict in Eritrea should be resolved within the framework of a united Ethiopia on the basis of some form of federal association. Next, the United States should also work for the speedy democratization of the Ethiopian political system and the institution of multi-party democracy in the country. The U.S. should have as its immediate objective the broadening of the current narrowly based rebel junta so that the vast majority of people excluded from the system under the London arrangements could be embraced. and brought into the system. It should also work for the withdrawal of the EPLF and EPRDF occupying forces from Addis Ababa and other towns, and their replacement by a national army and a police representing all ethnic groups in the country. To that end, Mr. Chairman, I urge Assistant Secretary of State, Mr. Cohen, to invite and preside over a conference of all political groups, both within and outside the country. I particularly urge him to invite the coalition of Ethiopian Democratic Forces, which enjoys wide support in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian people love and respect and admire the American people. The United States is the only country with the political and moral stature to usher in democracy in Ethiopia and help defend it against dismemberment. I therefore ask members of the committee, I also ask the administration, in particular the State Department, to reconsider the decisions taken and the actions taken in London and bring about an orderly transfer of power from this tiny, tightly knit group of a military junta to a broadly based representative government in Addis Ababa with the unity and territorial integrity of the country intact. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.